Millionaire sees homeless boy teaching his daughter. What she did next left everyone speechless. The bitter January cold in Chicago pierced through the holes in the wall of the abandoned warehouse like invisible knives. Marcus Johnson, 8, curled up tighter in the thin, faded blanket, the only thing left of his mother. His ribs showed clearly through his dark skin, and his large eyes seemed to take up half of his small, thin face. "Good morning, Mom," he whispered into the void, as he had done every morning for the past 3 months. The pain was still fresh, as sharp as the winter wind blowing through the broken windows. Marcus rose slowly, his bones aching from sleeping on the cold concrete floor. From the corner of the torn mattress, he carefully removed a piece of stale bread wrapped in a plastic bag. He had found it in the dumpster behind the bakery last night after the employees had left. He broke off a tiny piece and chewed slowly, making each crumb last. His stomach growled loudly, begging for more, but Marcus knew the most important rule of the streets: food must last. You never know when the next meal will be. As he ate, his hands automatically searched for the worn backpack on the floor, a birthday gift his mother had given him before everything fell apart. Inside were his treasures: 3 broken pencils he had found on the school floor, a pencil sharpener without a cap, and a stack of torn notebooks he had rescued from dumpsters behind schools. Most of the pages were scratched or dirty, but among them were blank spaces. To Marcus, those spaces were worth more than gold. "I'll make it, Mom," he murmured, touching the crumpled photo he kept in his pocket, the only one he had of her, taken at the hospital shortly before she died. "I'll become a doctor like I promised. No child will lose their mother because of a lack of money." The memory still burned like hot iron. Dr. Harrison shook his head wearily. "I'm sorry, but without health insurance, we can't continue treatment. It's advanced cancer. We would need $200,000 for chemotherapy." Marcus clung to the doctor's legs, his tears wetting the clean hospital floor. "Please, doctor. I'll work. I'll pay for everything when I grow up. Just don't let my mother die." But the rules of the American healthcare system were inflexible. No money, no treatment. It was that simple. His mother, Sarah Johnson, had worked 3 jobs to support them: cleaning offices at dawn, cashiers at the supermarket during the day, and washing dishes at the restaurant at night. Even so, there was never any money left over for health insurance. When cancer struck, it came like a financial tsunami that destroyed everything. "You're going to be somebody in life, baby," she whispered in her last days, her voice weak but determined. "You're going to help other people. Promise, Mommy." Marcus had promised. And now, alone in the world, that promise was all that kept him alive. He left the warehouse and walked through the icy streets of Chicago, his breath forming little white clouds in the air. His destination was always the same: Lincoln Elementary School, the most expensive private school in the Lincoln Park neighborhood, where rich kids studied behind golden gates. Marcus had discovered a hole in the back fence 3 months ago. It was small enough that only a skinny child like him could squeeze through. Every day, he would sneak onto the school grounds and hide behind the arts building, where he could hear the classes through the open windows. On that cold January morning, as he prepared for another day of clandestine education, Marcus had no idea that his life was about to change forever. That a 7-year-old blonde girl and her multimillionaire father were about to discover a secret that would shake his conceptions of talent, poverty, and human dignity. Inside Lincoln Elementary, Emma Wellington, the only child of real estate mogul Robert Wellington, was struggling with her math lesson. Her blonde hair fell over her face as she stared at the numbers in her notebook as if they were Egyptian hieroglyphics. "I hate math," she muttered to herself, biting the eraser of her pencil. Around her, the classroom was empty. It was recess time, and all the other students were out on the playground. Emma had stayed behind because she couldn't finish the addition and subtraction problems the teacher had assigned. Tears began to form in her blue eyes. She knew her father would be disappointed again. Robert Wellington expected perfection from his daughter. As one of the richest men in Chicago, with a real estate empire valued at $500 million, he had enrolled Emma in the best private school in the city, hired the best tutors, and bought all the most expensive educational materials. But none of that seemed to help Emma with numbers. That's when she heard a soft voice coming from the window: 5 minus 2 equals 3. Emma looked up, startled. Outside the window, a thin black boy was crouching, looking at her notebook through the glass. His clothes were so old and torn that they looked like rags, and he was shivering from the cold. For a moment, the two stared at each other in silence, Two completely different worlds separated only by a glass window. Emma swallowed hard, looking at the boy outside the window. He appeared to be her age, but he was so thin that he looked younger. His dark eyes sparkled with an intelligence she recognized immediately. "Who are you?" she whispered, moving closer to the window. "My name is Marcus," he replied softly, his teeth chattering from the cold. "Sorry for scaring you. I was just trying to learn too." Emma looked at her notebook, then at Marcus. "Do you know math?" Marcus nodded shyly. "I taught myself. With books I find in the trash." "In the trash?" Emma frowned. In her privileged life, she had never met anyone who needed to look for books in the trash. "Why aren't you in school?" Marcus's face closed up a little. "I can't afford school. So I come here to listen to the lessons through the window." Emma felt something strange in her chest, a mixture of sadness and curiosity. "Do you want to come in? It's very cold out there." Marcus shook his head quickly. "I can't. If they catch me, they'll call the police." "They won't," Emma said with the confidence of a child who had never been denied anything. "My father owns half this town. No one will do anything to me." She opened the window and held out her hand. "Come on, I'll help you in." Marcus hesitated. All his survival instincts screamed at him to run. But the cold was biting, and there was something in the girl's gentle voice that made him trust her. With careful movements, he crawled through the window and into the heated classroom. The contrast in temperature made his body shiver even more. "You're cold," Emma observed, taking off her pink cashmere sweater and offering it to him. "You can wear it." Marcus looked at the sweater. It probably cost more money than he had seen in his entire life. "I can't accept it. It'll get dirty." "It doesn't matter," Emma insisted, placing the sweater over his shoulders. "I have others at home." The warmth of the sweater enveloped Marcus like a hug. It had been months since he had felt so warm. "Now can you help me with math?" Emma asked, sitting down next to him. "I don't understand any of these numbers." Marcus looked at her notebook. The problems were simple, basic addition and subtraction, but he could see why a 7-year-old would have difficulty. "All right," he said gently. "Let's start with your fingers." For the next 20 minutes, Marcus taught Emma in a way that no expensive tutor had been able to. He used objects from the room, simple drawings, and explanations that a child could understand. 5 erasers minus 2 erasers, he said, moving the objects on the table. "That leaves 3 erasers. See?" Emma's eyes lit up. "I get it. I really get it." For the first time in weeks, she was able to solve all the problems on her own. Marcus watched her with a small but genuine smile, feeling a satisfaction he hadn't experienced in months. "You're very smart," Emma said, looking at him with admiration. "Why do you know so much if you don't go to school?" Marcus touched his backpack. "My mom taught me some things before she left. The rest I learn on my own, reading the books I find." "Where's your mom now?" Emma asked innocently. Marcus's face closed. "She died 3 months ago." Emma was silent for a moment, processing the information. In her sheltered life, she had never met anyone who had lost their mother. "What about your father?" "I never knew him," Marcus replied simply. Emma felt tears welling up in her eyes. "So you have no one?" Marcus shook his head. "Where do you live?" "In an old building downtown. It's abandoned, but it doesn't rain inside." Emma's tears began to fall. In her privileged life, she had never imagined that there were children like Marcus, smart, kind, but living in conditions she couldn't even imagine. It was at that moment that the classroom door swung open. Mrs. Patterson, Emma's strict teacher, entered the room and stopped immediately when she saw Marcus. Her eyes scanned his torn clothes, his dirty skin, and the stark contrast to Emma's impeccable appearance. "Emma Wellington," she shouted. "What is this? Who is this boy and how did he get into the school?" Emma quickly stood up, positioning herself between Marcus and the teacher. "He's my friend. He was teaching me math." "Teaching?" Mrs. Patterson laughed cruelly. This street kid was teaching you? Emma dear, you can't bring just anyone into the school. It's dangerous." Marcus slowly stood up, taking the sweater off his shoulders and offering it to Emma. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I shouldn't have come in." "No," Emma shouted, pushing the sweater back at him. "You didn't do anything wrong." Mrs. Patterson was already heading for the classroom phone. "I'm calling security right now. And I'm also calling your father, Emma. He needs to know about this immediately." Marcus felt panic rising in his chest. If they called security, if his father found out, everything would be over. He would never be able to go back to school to learn. But Emma wasn't going to give up so easily. "Don't call anyone," she said with an authority that surprised even Mrs. Patterson. "My father will want to meet Marcus first." "Emma dear, you don't understand." "I do understand." Emma interrupted. "Marcus taught me math better than any teacher I've ever had. He's smart and kind, and if you call security on him, I'll tell my father that you were cruel to a child who just wanted to learn." Mrs. Patterson hesitated. She knew Robert Wellington, one of the school's biggest donors and one of the most influential people in Chicago. The last thing she wanted was to get on his bad side. "All right," she said finally. "But you two stay here until your father arrives. And this boy stays right here with me." Emma smiled victoriously and took Marcus's hand. "Don't worry," she whispered to him. "My dad's cool. He'll understand." Marcus wasn't so sure. In his experience, wealthy adults weren't exactly known for being understanding toward street kids. But he had no choice. All he could do now was wait and hope that Emma was right about her father. Robert Wellington received Mrs. Patterson's call at 2:30 p.m., in the middle of a business meeting that would decide the fate of a $200 million skyscraper. When his assistant said it was about Emma, he immediately answered. "Mr. Wellington," Mrs. Patterson's tense voice echoed through the phone. "I need you to come to the school immediately." Emma brought an unauthorized visitor into the classroom. Robert frowned. "What kind of visitor?" Mrs. Patterson hesitated. "A homeless boy, sir. She says he was teaching her math." Robert nearly dropped the phone. His daughter, heir to a $500 million empire, being taught by a street kid? The situation was so absurd he couldn't even process it completely. "I'm on my way," he said curtly, hanging up the phone. 20 minutes later, Robert Wellington parked his black Mercedes-Benz AMG G-Wagon in front of Lincoln Elementary. His $2,000 Italian leather shoes echoed through the hallways as he walked quickly toward Emma's classroom. He opened the door, and the scene took him completely by surprise. Emma was sitting next to an extremely thin black boy, both of them hunched over a math notebook. The boy was patiently explaining a problem to his daughter, using colored pencils to draw pictures that made the numbers easier to understand. Robert stood in the doorway for a few seconds, watching. The boy, Marcus, according to Mrs. Patterson, spoke with a clarity and patience reminiscent of the best tutors Robert had hired for Emma. But his clothes were in tatters, his shoes had holes in them, and he was wearing Emma's expensive sweater. "Daddy!" Emma shouted when she saw him, running to hug him. "You're here. I want you to meet my friend Marcus." Robert looked at the boy, who had quickly stood up and was clearly terrified. His large eyes were filled with fear, but there was also something else, a quiet dignity that impressed Robert. "So you're Marcus," Robert said, his voice controlled but not hostile. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied softly. "I'm sorry for entering the school without permission. Emma was struggling with math, and I just wanted to help." "Daddy, you should have seen it," Emma said quickly. "Marcus taught me math in a way I've never understood before. Look." She showed her father her notebook, all the answers correct and clearly explained. Robert examined the work. It was perfect, better than anything Emma had done with her expensive tutors. "And where did you learn math, Marcus?" Robert asked. "My mother taught me a little before she died," Marcus replied. "The rest I learn on my own, from books I find." "Books you find where?" Marcus hesitated, clearly embarrassed. "In the trash, sir." Robert felt something strange in his chest. Here was a child who was literally searching for knowledge in the trash, while his own daughter had access to the best educational resources in the world and still struggled with basic concepts. "Mrs. Patterson," Robert said, turning to the teacher. "Can you leave us alone for a few minutes?" Mrs. Patterson hesitated. "Mr. Wellington, I don't think it's safe." "Please," Robert said firmly. His voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. When they were alone, Robert knelt down to Marcus's height. "Marcus, I want you to tell me your story. The whole story." For the next 15 minutes, Marcus told him everything. About his mother working 3 jobs, about the cancer they couldn't afford to treat, about living alone on the streets for 3 months, about coming to school every day to listen to lessons through the window. Robert listened quietly, his expression growing increasingly somber as the story unfolded. As a father, he couldn't imagine Emma going through anything remotely similar. "And what do you want to be when you grow up?" Robert asked when Marcus finished. Marcus's eyes lit up for the first time. "A doctor, sir. I want to be a doctor so that no child loses their mother because they can't afford treatment." Robert felt a tightness in his chest. The determination in the boy's voice was undeniable. "Daddy," Emma said softly, taking his hand. "Can we help Marcus? Please." Robert looked at his daughter, her blue eyes filled with genuine compassion, and then at Marcus, who was clearly trying not to look too hopeful. "Marcus," Robert said finally, "would you like to have dinner with us tonight? At our house?" Marcus blinked, surprised. "Sir, my daughter is right. You did something today that Harvard tutors couldn't do. You taught Emma math in a way she understood. That's worth something." Emma hugged her father tightly. "Thank you, Dad." Marcus still looked shocked. I don't have appropriate clothes to have dinner at your house." Robert smiled, the first genuine smile he had given in a long time. "Don't worry about it. We'll take care of everything." 2 hours later, Robert stood outside the most expensive children's clothing store on Michigan Avenue, watching Emma pick out clothes for Marcus as if he were her own brother. "This shirt is perfect," she exclaimed, holding up a light blue shirt. "It will match your eyes." Marcus looked at himself in the mirror, wearing clothes that cost more than his mother earned in 2 months. He looked like a completely different boy, clean, well-dressed, but still with those intelligent, determined eyes. "Do you feel comfortable?" Robert asked. Marcus nodded, but Robert could see the internal struggle on his face. Pride versus necessity. "Marcus," Robert said, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Accepting help doesn't make you any less of a man. Sometimes accepting help is the bravest thing we can do." That night, at the Wellingtons' $15 million mansion in Lincoln Park, something happened that no one expected. The Wellington mansion was a monument to American success. 12,000 square feet of Italian marble, imported hardwoods, and contemporary art that cost more than most people earn in a lifetime. Marcus walked reverently through the hallways, his new shoes echoing on the polished floors. "Our house is big, isn't it?" Emma commented casually, as if $15 million palaces were normal for all 7-year-olds. Marcus just nodded, speechless. The house was bigger than the entire building where he lived. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, a mahogany table for 12, decorated with crystal glasses that sparkled under the Waterford crystal chandelier. Marcus sat carefully, watching Emma to see which fork to use. Robert watched the boy's every move, impressed by his respectful attempt to follow proper etiquette, even though he had clearly never been in such a situation before. "So Marcus," Robert said when the first course arrived, a $200 Wagyu steak that Marcus stared at as if it were a work of art. "Emma told me you go to school every day, but you're not enrolled." Marcus cut off a tiny piece of the steak, chewing slowly to make it last. "Yes, sir. I listen to the lessons through the window. I've learned that education is the only way out of poverty." "And who taught you that?" "My mother." Marcus touched the pocket where he kept her photo. "She always said that knowledge is the only thing no one can take away from you." Robert felt a tightness in his chest. "Your mother was a wise woman." "She was the smartest person I ever knew," Marcus said, his eyes shining. "She worked 3 jobs, but every night she taught me something. Math, reading, science. She said that if I studied hard enough, I could have any future I wanted." Emma, who had been eating quietly, suddenly spoke up. "Daddy, can Marcus live with us? He has nowhere to stay, and our house is big enough." Robert nearly choked on his wine. "Emma, it's not that simple." "Why not?" Emma interrupted with the flawless logic of a child. "You always say our family has more money than we can spend. Marcus needs a place to live and a school to attend. We can give him that." Marcus shook his head quickly. I can't accept that. You've already done too much for me today. But why not? Emma pressed. You're my friend. Friends help each other. Robert looked at Marcus, seeing the internal struggle written on his young face. Pride, hope, and fear mingled in an expression that seemed too old for an 8-year-old. Marcus, Robert said carefully, what if it wasn't charity? What if it was a job? Marcus looked up, interested. Emma clearly learns better from you than from any tutor I've hired. And I've hired the best teachers from Harvard, MIT, Stanford. None of them could do what you did today. Robert leaned forward. How about this? You live here, attend the same school as Emma, and in exchange, you help her with her studies. It would be your job. Marcus's eyes lit up, but then clouded over again. I don't know if I can do that, sir. I've never studied in a real school. But you teach yourself by reading books from the trash, Robert pointed out. Imagine what you could do with real books, real teachers, and an entire library at your disposal. Emma clapped her hands. Please, Marcus. It would be so much fun to have a brother. Marcus looked at the two of them, the richest man he had ever met and the kindest girl he had ever encountered. For 3 months, he had survived on his own, battling hunger, cold, and despair. Now they were offering him not just survival, but the chance to fulfill his dream. Can I think about it? He asked quietly. Of course, Robert said. But why don't you stay tonight anyway? It's too cold outside for a child to be on the street. That night, Marcus lay down in a real bed for the first time in 3 months. The guest room was larger than the entire area where he normally slept, and the bed was so soft that he was almost afraid to sink into it. He took the crumpled photo of his mother out of his pocket and held it to his chest. What do you think, Mom? He whispered to the photo. They seem like good people. And I could really study to be a doctor. In his mind, he could almost hear her voice. Baby, sometimes God puts angels in our path when we need them most. The next morning, Robert found Marcus in the library, quietly reading a medical book that was 3 levels above what an 8-year-old should be able to understand. Good morning, Robert said, sitting down next to him. How did you sleep? Better than I've slept in 3 months, Marcus replied honestly. Thank you. Have you decided about our offer? Marcus closed the book and looked Robert straight in the eye. If I stay, I promise I'll work harder than any child has ever worked. I'll study every free moment I have. I'll be the best student you've ever seen. Robert smiled. Do I take that as a yes? Yes, sir. Emma appeared at the library door in her pajamas, smiling from ear to ear. So you're staying? Really? Marcus nodded, and for the first time in 3 months, he smiled genuinely. Yay! Emma shouted, running to hug both Marcus and her father. Now we have a complete family. Robert hugged them both, feeling something he hadn't felt in years, the feeling that he was doing the right thing. But he didn't know that his decision to help Marcus would not only change the boy's life, but completely transform his own perspective on wealth, privilege, and the true meaning of family. 6 months later, Marcus's transformation was almost unrecognizable. He had grown 3 inches, gained enough weight to no longer look skeletal, and his eyes sparkled with the confidence of a child who finally had stability. At Lincoln Elementary, he quickly became the brightest student in the school. Teachers who had initially viewed him with suspicion now fought to have him in their advanced classes. Marcus devoured knowledge like a sponge. Math, science, history, literature. Everything was fascinating to someone who had spent months dreaming of learning. Marcus solved algebra problems that we normally teach high school students, the principal told Robert during a conference. Your foster son is a genuine prodigy. Foster son. The words made Robert smile. The adoption papers had been finalized the previous month, making Marcus officially a Wellington. But the real transformation wasn't just academic. At home, Marcus became the big brother Emma never knew she needed. He helped her with homework, protected her from bullies at school, and was gradually teaching her about empathy and gratitude in ways that all the wealth in the world never could. Daddy, Emma said one night over dinner, today Marcus showed me where he used to sleep before he came to live with us. Robert looked up. Oh, really? It was so cold and dirty, Emma continued, her big eyes filling with tears. I can't imagine how he survived on his own for so long. Marcus gently touched her arm. Don't worry about it, Emma. I'm here with you now. But there are other children there still, Emma said. I saw 3 different children looking for food near the building where Marcus used to live. Can't we help them too? Robert looked at his 2 children, because that's how he thought of them now, as 2 children. Marcus had brought a perspective to their lives that he didn't even know was missing. What do you have in mind? Robert asked. Emma and Marcus exchanged glances, clearly having planned this conversation. How about we turn one of your empty buildings into a place where homeless children can live and study? Emma suggested, her eyes shining with determination. Marcus nodded enthusiastically. It could be like an orphanage, but better. With libraries, classrooms, and people who really care. Robert was silent for a moment, processing the proposal. His children, a spoiled 7-year-old girl who had learned compassion, and an 8-year-old boy who had overcome extreme poverty, were proposing to use his wealth to solve a real social problem. Do you know how much that would cost? Robert asked. Dad, Emma said with the wisdom of someone who had learned about inequality through Marcus's eyes, you always say that money is just paper if we don't use it for something important. Robert smiled. It was true, he had said this countless times, but he had never really lived by those words until Marcus came into their lives. All right, he said finally. Let's do it. 2 years later, the Wellington Center for Children at Risk had become a national model. The 5-story building in downtown Chicago housed 50 children, offering not only shelter but first-class education, medical care, and most importantly, hope. Marcus, now 10, often visited the center to tutor younger children. He had become a legend among them, the street kid who became a millionaire's son and proved that dreams were possible. Remember, he told a group of 6- and 7-year-olds during a tutoring session, education is the one thing no one can take away from you. It doesn't matter where you come from, it matters where you're going. Emma, now 9, was also present, helping the younger children with basic math. She had transformed from a privileged and disconnected child into an empathetic young woman who understood her role in the world. Robert watched from afar, feeling a pride that was completely different from any professional success he had ever achieved. His wealth finally had real purpose. Mr. Wellington, one of the children at the center, a 7-year-old girl named Keisha, tugged at his sleeve. Is it true that Marcus used to live on the street like us? It's true, Robert replied, kneeling down to her level. And now he's your son? Now he's my son. Keisha smiled. Then maybe one day someone will adopt me too? Robert felt tears well up in his eyes. Keisha, I can promise you one thing. I will make sure you have every opportunity you deserve, whether through adoption or any other means. That evening, at the Wellington mansion, the family gathered for their weekly dinner, a tradition that began on Marcus's first day with them. Dad, Marcus said, now speaking with the confidence of someone who knew he belonged there, I got my aptitude test score today. Robert raised an eyebrow. And? Marcus smiled. I scored in the top 1% nationally. My counselor said I can apply to any university in the country when the time comes. Emma clapped. That means you can actually become a doctor. It means more than that, Marcus said, looking at Robert with deep gratitude. It means I can become the kind of doctor who treats people regardless of whether they can afford to pay. Robert smiled, remembering the hungry child he had met 2 years ago, a child who taught math through a window, driven only by a pure passion to learn and help. Marcus, he said, your mother would be proud. 5 years later, Marcus Wellington graduated as valedictorian from Lincoln Elementary, with a full scholarship to the best prep school in Chicago. His story had spread across national media, the street kid who became a millionaire's son through education and compassion. But for Marcus, the real victory wasn't the headlines or opportunities. It was knowing that his promise to his mother was being fulfilled. He was on his way to becoming a doctor, and more importantly, he was using his platform to help other children like him. During his graduation, he was invited to give a speech. He took the stage, no longer the skinny, scared child from 3 years ago, but a confident young man who had found his voice. 3 years ago, he began, his voice clear and strong. I was a homeless child who learned by listening to classes through a school window because I couldn't afford to study. Today, I graduate as the top student in my class. He paused, looking at Robert and Emma in the audience. This didn't happen because I was special. It happened because someone saw potential where others saw only poverty. Emma Wellington taught me that kindness is priceless. Robert Wellington taught me that true success is measured by the good we do in the world. Tears streamed freely down Robert's face. If this story inspires you, don't just feel sorry for children like I was. Do something. Mentor a child. Donate to organizations that help at-risk youth. See potential where others see only problems. Marcus looked directly at the cameras broadcasting his speech. And to the children watching who feel invisible, hopeless, remember that your past does not determine your future. Education is the key. Kindness exists. And sometimes, all we need is one person who believes in us to change everything. The audience rose to their feet in applause, but Marcus only had eyes for his family, Robert, Emma, and in the front row, Keisha and 6 other children from the Wellington Center whom he had helped mentor. His journey was just beginning, but he knew that he carried with him not only his own dreams, but the hopes of all the children who were still waiting for their chance. If this story touched your heart and made you believe that a child can change the world when given the right opportunity, leave a like and subscribe. Have you ever been underestimated because of your circumstances? How did you overcome it? Share in the comments. Remember, sometimes the greatest talents come from the most unexpected places. The question is not where a child comes from, but how far they can go when someone believes in them. Comment unlimited potential if you also believe that every child deserves the chance to shine. See you in the next video with more stories that prove miracles happen when hearts open to compassion.